All right, so where we left off last time, right, was with Odysseus about to reveal himself to his hosts, the Phaeacians, right? So who wants to start us off today? Where do you guys want to begin? What do you guys want to talk about? Anybody? Yeah, Alexa.
Can we talk about the underworld?
We can absolutely talk about the underworld. Yes. What do you want to talk about regarding the underworld?
The prophet.
Okay.
How do you pronounce her name?
Okay. Yeah. He goes to Hades to locate this prophet Tiresias, who is supposed to be able to tell him how he can get home. Right. So, what was it that you found interesting about Tiresias?
The fact that she was blind,
Yeah, the blindness is actually a common trope in Greek art and Greek literature. Prophets are often blind, right? Essentially, for being given insight into the secrets of the gods, their earthly sight is then taken away from them. So yeah, it's very common for prophets to be blind. Yes, go ahead, keep going.
I wanted to say, it kind of reminded me of the cartoon movie of Hercules, when he goes to Hades and meet the ladies down there.
Okay, I have actually never seen that, so...
Oh, okay, never mind. But it just reminds me because they didn't have any eyes, and there was a pool.
Okay. I think those particular figures you're talking about, they're called the Graeae. They're the sisters of the Gorgons, so Medusa and her two sisters have the snakes for hair and turn people to stone when they look at them. And the Graeae are blind cannibalistic witches who share a single eye between them. But they don't show up in this particular tale, right? But like the blind prophet Tiresias, they do have particular insights that they're willing to share with you before they try to devour you.
You said blind cannibalistic witches?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
There are lots of, shall we say, people-eating creatures in the world of Greek mythology. Yeah, that's another fairly common trope. Cannibalism is actually a fairly big taboo for the Greeks.
Isn't that one of the only taboos that's pretty consistent across cultures?
It actually isn't. And in fact, even in European culture, up to the 17th century or the 17th or 18th centuries, certain kinds of cannibalism were fairly common. Well, for example, eating certain body parts of dead people to cure particular illnesses, things of that nature. There was a good deal of medical cannibalism, believe it or not, in Europe. So the idea that cannibalism is something that all cultures at all times are largely not okay with is completely false. It's been much more prevalent throughout human history than we often tend to realize. And I think one of the things to note, though, about what we see in a lot of these Greek myths, it's not people eating people, it's monsters eating people. We do see direct cannibalism in some Greek myths. The myth of the house of Atreus, for example. The general Agamemnon's father murders his brother's sons and feeds them to him in a stew, right? There are other myths in which people are tricked into eating family members. And that's kind of a side issue. This is kind of a digression from what's really sort of important in the Odyssey. Now, in the Cyclops episode, what the eating of people shows is barbarism. Right? There are other things in the Cyclops episode that are also indicators of barbarism. But yeah, eating people is kind of the big one there. Now, to go back to Tiresias, this issue of the prophet, I think if we look at Tiresias and what Tiresias says to Odysseus, we also get a pretty good indication of what Greek prophecy typically looked like. So if we look on page 453, right, and then he came, the ghost of Theban Tiresias, bearing a golden staff. He knew me and said, Odysseus, son of Laertes, master of wiles, why have you come, leaving the sunlight, to see the dead in this joyless place? Move off from the pit and take away your sword, so I may drink the blood and speak the truth to you. I drew back and slid my silver-studded sword into its sheath. After he had drunk the dark blood, the flawless seer arose and said to me, You seek a homecoming sweet as honey, shining Odysseus, but a god will make it bitter. For I do not think you will elude the Earthshaker, who has laid up wrath in his heart against you, furious because you blinded his son. Still, you just might get home, though not without pain, you and your men, if you curb your own spirit, and theirs too, when you beach your ship on Thrinacia. You will be marooned on that island in the Violet Sea, and find there the cattle of Helios the sun and his sheep too, grazing. Leave these unharmed, keep your mind on your homecoming, and you may still reach Ithaca, though not without pain. But if you harm them, I foretell doom for you, your ship and your crew. And even if you yourself escape, you will come home late and badly, having lost all companions, and in another ship. So does Tiresias tell him exactly what's going to happen?
Yeah, basically.
Kind of. She
Go
says
ahead.
what's going to happen based on which decisions you make.
Tiresias is actually a man, just to point that out.
Alright.
In mythology, Tiresias has actually lived both as a man and a woman, but in death is a man.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm sorry, yeah, could you repeat that, Darlene?
Yeah, that he essentially tells them what's going to happen based on which choices he makes.
Yeah. His prophecy is filled with conditional statements, right? But if, right, you might, you may. So, while the eventual outcome may be more or less predetermined, yes, Odysseus will get home. The way he's going to get there, like as we talked about last time, is not, right? This is where Poseidon and the other gods can make things difficult for him, where even his own choices can make things difficult for him. So even though, okay, you know what your ultimate fate is, you know, or your ultimate fate anyway is preset, the span of your life is preset, there's still some room for free will within that. There's still some room for change. There's still some room for you to affect the outcome. At least to make yourself less miserable. Right? We see a similar thing in the Cyclops' prayer to Poseidon, right? The Cyclops' prayer includes an if.
Which, I have a question about.
Yeah.
Why would the Cyclops have prayed against him anyway if it was a prophecy that was going to happen? Like, he knew he was going to lose his eye. So, like, that wasn't a big shock.
Well, he can still be pissed about it, right? I mean, if somebody drives a red-hot stake into your eye, I would want my father, the sea god, to curse them as well, right? Even if it was already fated to happen.
Well, then why not curse him before it ever happened so that it didn't happen?
Because it's already fate.
Yeah, it's gonna happen. So now, once it's happened, he can get revenge, even if he can't stop it from happening. So, prophecy is sort of largely conditional. There are certain things that are going to happen, but there's wiggle room within that makes room for personal choices. Right, so Tiresias is the reason Odysseus goes to the underworld, right, to consult this seer. Is there anything else you noticed about the underworld journey that struck you as interesting or weird?
You just sailed there.
Yeah, the Greeks conceived of the underworld as a real place within the earth that you could actually go to. Most ancient cultures actually did, right? That it was, in fact, beneath the earth. Now, Homer places it on an island that's at the edge, like all of these islands are at the edge of the world, right? In a sort of fantasy land that you probably couldn't find the coordinates of if you tried. In later Roman epics, though, they describe the underworld as being directly under a real lake in Italy called Lake Avernus. So the idea that a human being can journey to the underworld, right, is very, very real to these people. That you can, in fact, journey to the... If you journey there while alive, you probably won't come back. But they acknowledge the possibility. Yeah, go ahead.
If it's like under a lake
Mm-hmm.
and there are people living in that area, like wouldn't they have found an entrance?
There is a cave, actually.
So
Now, the reason they thought Lake Avernus was the entrance to the underworld is that it's sulfurous, it smells bad, and it's highly, like, the water seems to be toxic to various kinds of waterfowl. So the fact that things around it tended to die prevented people from wanting to live near it as well.
And possibly-
They associated the lake with death.
but the sulfur is also in popular mythology considered like a sign
Mm-hmm.
of
Yeah, sulfur, brimstone, yeah. That smell indicates that you're near, not the heavenly gods, but the infernal gods, right? The gods that live under the earth. And that's actually an important thing to note here as well when we look at the way Odysseus sacrifices to various gods. This tells us a little bit something about cultural beliefs and practices as well. We saw similar things in Gilgamesh, right? When Enkidu and Gilgamesh were on their way out to fight Humbaba, they make sacrifices to the gods in the sky up on top of mountains, right? You build a raised altar and you burn you cook the meat, and the gods devour the smoke, right? That's the part of it they want. And you eat the flesh. That's how you reach the gods in the sky. Send smoke up, build a raised altar. If you're trying to contact the gods in the ground, you have to put the things they want in a pit. So we see him, right? He digs the pit, and he sacrifices the ram and the ewe in the pit and pours out the blood, right? This is, pardon?
what does the underworld want? Like if the
That's what I'm saying, is that the underworld deities, the spirits of the underworld, want you to put things in a pit. What they want is the blood.
okay.
That's what they're after. It's what's called a chthonic sacrifice. Chthonic. Which essentially means sort of like earth sacrifice, right? You're pouring something into the earth.
So did they want the blood because that's like the life, and so they're trying to like take your life?
Exactly, yeah. They want the thing that is denied to them down there. They want that life essence. This is what, if you notice, like, with the exception of Tiresias, do any of these spirits remember anything of their previous lives before they drink the blood? Right, the blood gives them a semblance of life again, right? The blood brings them back. I'm sorry, you had a hand up, Alexa. What
Oh,
were you
no,
going to
you
say?
answered my question.
Okay. Yeah.
Why is this so much different than like all the like if we look at, for instance, the Christian Bible or something like that, that particular God wants, like a sacrifice of, for instance, grain or sheep and
Well, remember, he actually didn't want grain. He denied Cain's sacrifice. Actually, it's really not that different. The practices across the Mediterranean in particular were really very similar. Basically, if you wanted to eat meat, it had to be somehow sanctioned by the gods. So you cooked it. Basically, ancient world altars were it was like a barbecue, right? You cooked it. The smoke goes up into the heavens. That's the part the gods get. So you're giving them their portion. And then you eat the fleshly parts that remain. the Israelites followed more or less the same practices. They were only sacrificing to one god in the sky. That's where the difference is. In fact, there's actually one of the reasons why we have different layers of narration, but we talked about those different source texts. The J text and the E text, according to some theorists, were written by different lines of the priesthood. The J authors claimed descent from Moses. The E authors claimed descent from Aaron. And the E authors believed that sacrifices should be allowed to be made in various so-called high places all around Israel. Basically, if people wanted to eat meat, they shouldn't have to go to the temple in Jerusalem to do it, because that's most inconvenient. Whereas the J author came from the Aaronite line and was in favor of centering all sacrifices in the temple rather than having local high places. That's one particular theory about it. Anyway, yeah, Darlene.
The views on fate are kind of the same between the Bible and this too, like
Okay.
the prophecies,
Mhm.
because they're talking about how, like, yes, this is going to happen, but based on your decisions, that's going to change how it happens. Is that a
Yeah.
common theme across
Mhm.
all of them?
Yeah, and
at the
yeah,
same time?
yeah. If you look at a lot of the prophetic books in the Old Testament, there's a look. This is coming to you because of your sinful ways, but this is how you might endure it. Yeah. No. Yeah. You're absolutely right to point that there are strong similarities. And look again. Like remember, right? This is the same. It's basically the same part of the world. Right. And these cultures are all in. These cultures have contact with each other, direct or indirect. And so certain ideas do really bleed across borders.
So were these written around the same time also?
They were written, by and large, the poems that make up the Iliad and the Odyssey are probably much older. One thing I will say is that they both actually draw on the same alphabet, right? The first known human alphabet was devised by a people called the Phoenicians, right? A seafaring people who lived in what is now Lebanon. The Hebrew alphabet is just straight up Phoenician alphabet, right? Hebrew is still written using the old Phoenician alphabet, which doesn't have any vowels in it. So typically, in order to figure out vowels, you have to go by context, right? In order to actually figure out what the vowels in a word are supposed to be. This makes translation of ancient biblical text actually really difficult. What the Greeks did was take the Phoenician alphabet and add vowels to it. So this is another sort of cultural link, right? Yeah, keep going.
Is there any relation between the real Phoenicians and
These Phaeacians?
Yes.
No, these Phaeacians are completely fictional.
Okay. I just didn't know they
Yeah.
were like based upon those people or something.
The only people whom Odysseus encounters in his journeys that are a real nation are you might remember at the very beginning of his little tale here, he talks about a raid that he and his men committed, people called the Sicones. And they were allies of the Trojans in the Trojan War. So he feels justified in conducting a little raid on their territory. And it's after he leaves their territory that he basically leaves the real world.
Did he just go crazy from being out on sea so long? And that's where all the stories come from?
Well, again, it's myth, so we don't really have to take it too literally. But it seems that after this real-world encounter, which doesn't actually go all that well for him, it's after this that he starts drifting in this odd sort of fantasy orbit, right? Now, one thing to remember about his tale, though, right? What's happened to all of his men by this point? They're dead, right? He's the last man standing. He's the only one left of his crew. So, does he need to tell Alcinous and the Phaeacians the truth about where he's been all this time? No. There's nobody to verify the facts. Because all of the places he goes to are not reachable by normal means, right? So, he could very well just make shit up to give them a good story. Right? We have no real reason to believe or to trust Odysseus, in part because we know who he is. We know his reputation. Right? He is, as Tiresias calls him, right? Odysseus, the man of wiles, right? The cunning Odysseus, the clever Odysseus, right? Whose mind is always teeming, right? Whose plots are always spinning. We know he's a trickster. We know he's a liar.
But he's also broken at that point, so would he be able to, still be that cunning?
He's doing pretty well for somebody who's broken, right? He still beats the Phaeacians in all of their games. He is impressing the hell out of them all day. This is in part with help from the gods, right? And he really, really wants something from them, right? He really, really wants a ship and supplies to get himself home. He's also got hospitality to repay, right? So he may as well repay that hospitality with a good story. Yeah.
Doesn't that kind of say something about the author itself? If Odysseus in this story is basically all alone, I mean, the author could have even meant a lot of it as from Odysseus' point of view instead of reality.
Well, we do also see Odysseus from the outside, though, right?
Yeah.
There is this portion is narrated by Odysseus himself,
Right.
but the whole thing isn't. So we do get perspectives on Odysseus that are often less flattering than what he says about himself. Not to mention that, remember too, that we know virtually nothing about who wrote this poem. We're not even sure entirely that it's the work of one person. So any arguments about authorial intent tend to fall apart there. Right? That we simply can't say enough, we don't know enough about the author to have any idea what the author intended. But let's go back to, I feel like we have, this has been relevant, we've wandered a little bit from where we were. Let's talk about a little bit more of this underworld stuff. Anything else you notice going on of interest in this underworld portion? Who else does he meet in the? I mean, he's there for Tiresias, right? Pardon? Yep. Mother. Mother is here. Who else?
Achilles.
Yep. Achilles, old friend and comrade.
Hercules.
Yep. Hercules is wandering about. His immortal essence is up with the gods, but what remains of his mortal form is down here in the underworld. Pardon?
The man that died at Circe's off the roof.
Yep.
Oh,
Elpenor,
Ajax.
his dead crewman. Ajax, his rival who ignores him. And Agamemnon as well. And not all, but many of these figures ask Odysseus essentially the same question. Right? Why is Odysseus' mother down here? How did she die? What killed her? Pardon?
Sorrow.
Sorrow over what?
His failure to return.
Yeah, sorrow over the loss of her son, right? And she talks about what his father is doing. His father's not dead, but what's happened to his father?
He sleeps with the slaves.
Yes, he sleeps with the slaves and wears dirty clothes and, covers his head in ashes and all that. Mourning for his son who is not returned. What about Achilles and Agamemnon? What do they want to know about?
Families, like their sons.
They want to know specifically about their sons, yeah, right. Agamemnon has daughters too, doesn't ask about the daughters. Right? Where's my son? How is my son doing? Right, let's see, where is it? Right, 462, yes. Tell me truthfully if you've heard anything about my son, and where he is living, perhaps in Orchomenus, or in sandy Pylos, or with Menelaus in Sparta, for Orestes has not yet perished from the earth. He doesn't ask about any of his other family members. He just wants to know about his son. Achilles asks about his son as well, right? But tell me about that boy of mine. Why do they all want to know about their sons? What's the big deal here with sons?
Their legacy.
Yeah, that's the legacy you leave. If you're Greek, right? Daughters don't matter. Daughters are property. It's sons who carry on your line. And if we look again at this underworld concept, right, Achilles actually tells us a good bit about it. Right, Odysseus addresses him on page 463. Right, Achilles, by far the mightiest of the Achaeans, I have come here to consult Tiresias to see if he has any advice for me on how I might get back to rugged Ithaca. I've had nothing but trouble and have not yet set foot on my native land. But no man, Achilles, has ever been as blessed as you, or ever will be. While you were alive, the army honored you like a god. And now that you are here, you rule the dead with might. You should not lament your death at all, Achilles. I spoke, and he answered me at once. Don't try to sell me on death, Odysseus. I'd rather be a hired hand back up on earth, slaving away for some poor dirt farmer, than lord it over all these withered dead. Right? The underworld sucks. Even if you were the most honored of mortals while alive, death is boring. There is nothing for you to do down here. There is no real kind of immortality of the soul, right? Because what do we know about these shades when they haven't had living blood to consume?
They know nothing.
They know nothing.
Except for Tiresias.
Yes, with the exception of Tiresias, because he has special dispensations from the gods, right? But for everybody else, unless they drink the blood of that sacrifice, they know absolutely nothing. They remember absolutely nothing. Their existence is a blank.
Isn't that kind of like the Gilgamesh type thing? Because like everybody is going to these underworlds and these myths. They're like, there's no escaping that portion of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is, in all of these ancient Mediterranean religions, right, there is no good afterlife. There is no glorious afterlife. Some belief systems develop that later. Right? The Greeks will develop a sort of special paradise for heroes much later than these poems. But yeah, at the beginnings of most ancient religions, right, the afterlife sucks because it doesn't matter. It doesn't really mean anything. It's just, well, okay, we can't imagine that your soul entirely disappears or goes away, but we can imagine sort of something like that, where you just sort of flit around inside the earth forever, not really remembering anything.
It seems like almost like a mixture of like the purgatory and like the Christian hell, like the two of them kind of. Because
Well, you know, it's not a place of punishment, right? Except
Right.
there are people who blasphemed against the gods here who are being punished. But by and large, for most people, it's neither a place of reward nor a place of punishment. It's
Like-
just nothing.
I mean, it seems like purgatory, but that's like literally. what
But
it
even
is.
like the Catholic concept of purgatory, there's a way out, right?
Right.
Eventually,
Eventual judgment.
eventually you're supposed to work through it. You don't work through this. You don't get out of this. This is forever. So the only thing that matters, again, is what you've left on earth. Yeah, Will.
So why have a judge of the dead if they can't do anything?
Yeah, that's a good question. It doesn't seem to matter, right? Except for, again, those blasphemers who are being punished.
Okay.
I guess, you know, my guess is that the judge is there essentially to, you know, punish people who really pissed off the gods. But otherwise, even for heroes like Achilles and Agamemnon, there's nothing. Only the memory, when they can get it, of life in the upper world and the knowledge that they're sons continue their biological legacy, right? Your living biological legacy matters a lot more than anything else. This is why sons are so important to them. Okay, anybody have any other questions about the Underworld episode? All right. Any other episodes here that struck you as weird or interesting that you think you might want to discuss? That you have questions about?
Why did Odysseus feel the need to go into like the cave where the
Mhm.
Cyclops was at? I don't understand why he just had to go in there.
Yeah, it seems to us like a pretty fucking stupid idea, right? This is a giant cave, great big rock at the entrance. Whatever lives in here is probably huge. But what is he testing out?
To see if he'll get gifts of hospitality.
Yeah. He expects, because this is the Greek custom, that, okay, if I go to visit some other place and sort of set myself down by their hearth, they're supposed to give me a gift. And they're supposed to help me on my way. Right, this is why he's so wary when he meets Nausicaa, the Phaeacian princess, right? Because these are the kinds of experiences that he doesn't know yet what to expect from her. So part of what he's doing here is explaining reasons why he was wary about coming to the city and revealing his identity. Right, yes, he expects that the Cyclops is going to give him gifts. But there are signs from the beginning that he's not going to get them. He just hasn't learned to read those signs yet.
I mean, like, why would he be so skeptical about, like, these girls and then just act foolishly in other ways? Like, it doesn't make sense.
Well, remember that he's meeting these girls long after the encounter with the Cyclops, right? So by that point, he's learned his lesson.
It's like a 16-year-old girl will fall in love like that, but a 40-year-old woman isn't going to do it because she's already learned.
That's a decent analogy. Yeah, life experience teaches you things, right? He had at the time that he lands on the Cyclops Island, he hasn't yet learned how to read the terrain, right? So,
I mean, he calls them freak of nature, not like men who eat bread. And still goes in the cave.
Yeah.
I don't think it follows logic.
No, it doesn't. But again, it's myth. It doesn't always have to.
Well, he's not a logical person. He had the chance. The
Mhm.
men said, well, we can get away with the cheese and the animals. But that's not who
Right.
Odysseus is. He's like, screw what you think.
Mhm.
I'm going to do it my way.
Yeah, one, he's got to show his men he's in control.
Mhm.
And two, he likes to get things through trickery. If he can get one over on whatever lives in this cave, he's happier doing that than simply running off with the cheese. Now, the fact that the cave is filled with sheep and goats and cheese tells us something as well. Now, what did shepherding indicate when we looked at the book of Genesis?
That was actually the good one. That was the good profession.
Shepherding was the good profession. Yes. You were taking the world as it was given to you, right? Farming was the bad profession because you were making tools to cut into the earth, right? And you were not trusting in the goodness of the Lord to provide for you. How's that work here?
Farming is civilization.
Yeah, farming is what civilized people do. Herding is what barbarians do. Shepherds are barbarians. So the fact that the Cyclops keeps sheep and goats should be an indication to Odysseus that he's not safe here. What else does he notice about the land when he's spying it out?
That it was fertile.
Yeah, it's fertile, right? This is really beautiful land. Look on page 428. fertile island slants across the harbor's mouth, neither very close nor far from the Cyclops shore. It's well wooded and populated with innumerable wild goats, uninhibited by human traffic. Not even hunters go there, tramping through the woods and roughing it on the mountainsides. It pastures no flocks, has no tilled fields, unplowed, unsown, virgin forever, bereft of men. All it does is support those bleeding goats. The Cyclops do not sail and have no craftsmen to help them build benched, red-prowed ships that could supply all their wants crossing the sea to other cities, visiting each other as other men do. These same craftsmen would have made this island into a good settlement. It's not a bad place at all and would bear everything in season. Meadows lie by the seashore, lush and soft, where vines would thrive. It is level plowland with deep, rich soil that would produce bumper crops season after season. The harbor's good too. No need for moorings, anchor stones, or tying up. Just beach your ship until the wind is right and you're ready to sail. At the harbor's head, a spring flows clear and bright from a cave surrounded by poplars. So what's he viewing this island in terms of? What's he think? Pardon?
Potential farmability.
Yeah, potential. Exactly. He's thinking almost like a colonist. Wow. This is really great land. There's a good harbor here. It's fertile. There's already some animal life that you could herd, right? Somebody with the will to do it could tame this land and turn it into something. But right now it's just being left wild. It's just being left overgrown. So he always thinks like someone who wants to come in and improve things, right? Who wants to come in and civilize places. We see him repeating this same pattern on other islands. But yeah, the fact that the island itself is largely left untamed is also a sign of barbarism. That the Cyclops don't farm, they don't build, they have no craftsmen. One more, yeah, go ahead, Kayla.
I just had a question about the Cyclops scene.
Yeah.
After it was all said and done and they were getting ready to load the animals on the ship, he
Uh-huh.
forbid the men to mourn for their loss of their other men. So
Yeah.
what was different about the previous time when he was actually mourning with them?
Mm-hmm.
So what changed there? Like, why did he forbid them? Was it just because he was scared that the Cyclops would just realize what happened and would come destroy them? Or?
Yeah, you know, it's a good question, and we see that afterwards, right, Zeus refuses to accept his sacrifice.
Mm-hmm.
So it's clear that there are a couple of things he does wrong as he leaves the island, right? He refuses to allow the men who died to be mourned. He tells the Cyclops' name. And when he tries to sacrifice to Zeus, Zeus does not, Zeus doesn't send a sign that he accepts, right? So he's transgressed in some way on this island. I think that the transgression to Zeus is the refusal to mourn for the shipmates. And yeah, we don't necessarily get a clear motive for that, because they were in just as much a hurry to leave the island of the Cicones as they were to leave the Cyclops island. But yeah, it's made clear afterwards that this was the wrong thing to do.
At that point in time though, hadn't the curse/prayer from Poseidon been given, so couldn't Zeus be mad at him because now his brother's mad at him?
It could, although the anger of one god doesn't necessarily imply the anger of another, right? We see that the gods don't always get along. One more thing I want to point out about the Cyclops. Does anybody know how the Greeks drank, what the Greeks did to drink wine, how they made wine? Okay. Yeah. Oh, yeah. They would probably stomp it with their feet, right? But how many of you have ever made orange juice from concentrate?
I haven't, but that's disgusting. From
Mm-hmm.
oranges?
Yeah. Well, no, but you get the little frozen tube.
Yeah.
It's the solid mass of, or sometimes you get a syrup that you pour into water and stir it to dilute it.
Like chocolate milk.
Yeah, sure, something like chocolate milk. You get the thick syrup and you pour that into milk. That's kind of what Greek wine was like, right? It was a thick, syrupy concentrate. And As such, you were supposed to pour it into a bowl of water and mix it in order to dilute it. You were not supposed to drink it straight. Yeah, which is exactly what the Cyclops does. Again, proving that he's not a civilized person. Right?
Isn't the fact that he has wine though, that's kind of like,
It's not his, it's Odysseus' wine that he was given for not killing one of the Cicones priests, right? Hey, thank you for not cutting my head off. Here's a jug of wine, right? So yeah, it's wine that Odysseus has brought with him. It's not wine that the Cyclops had. Yes?
So why was it an issue that he told the Cyclops his name?
Because if the Cyclops knows his name, he can curse him.
Is that like a thing with just Cyclopses, or was that
With anybody. Yeah. Telling people your name can be a really, really dangerous thing. I mean, think of it like today, right? If you give a stranger your name, that gives that stranger the means to find out an awful lot about you, right? It's fairly easy, if you know someone's name, to do a little bit of digging online to find out other information about them, right? Address, hobbies and interests, social security number even, right? You can start with a name, and if you know where to look, you can do all kinds of damage. Now, of course, what this gives the Cyclops enough information to do is to call down the wrath of the gods on the right person. It's like, oh, I know who you are. If he had called down the wrath of the gods on no man, that wouldn't have worked, right? I call down the wrath of the gods on no man. It's like, well, okay, great. Why'd you bother us? Much like the other Cyclops react, right, when he's shouting that no man is hurting him. So, the big deal with telling people his name is people who don't know his name can't harm him in these ways, right? People who don't know his name can't curse him. Okay, so I do want to talk a little bit about the Circe episode as well. There are a couple of important things going on here. What'd you make of this? What'd you think of the Circe's Island? What's weird about Circe's Island?
besides the
It's
spelling?
guarded by mountain lions and
Okay,
wolves.
there are mountain lions and wolves that don't act like mountain lions and wolves, right? They're drugged and they fawn on her. What else is weird about Circe's Island? What's missing from it when Odysseus and his crew get there? No, there are people here, right? Men, exactly. It's an all-female island. Circe and her servants are all women. Which to the Greeks would, of course, be abominable. Right? You can't have this. You can't have an island ruled by women. Right, so Odysseus's task here is to make Circe's island, quote unquote, normal by Greek standards, right? So he sends his men out to find, out to follow the smoke, and what happens to them?
They don't come back.
Do not come back. Yep.
Except for that one.
Except for, poor terrified Eurylochus, yes.
I think that's his name.
Who is telling stories of men being changed into pigs, right? She drugged them, and she turned them into pigs, right? I stayed outside because I didn't trust her, but yeah, the rest of them are all pigs. Now, what might this suggest as well about the stag that Odysseus has killed when the ship landed?
That it was actually a man and she turned into a beast.
Yeah, that stag is actually described in pretty human-like terms. Look on page 442. I was on my way back and close to the ship when some god took pity on me, walking there alone, and sent a great antlered stag right into my path. He was on his way down to the river from his pasture in the woods, thirsty and hot from the sun beating down. And as he came out, I got him right on the spine in the middle of his back. The bronze spear bored all the way through, and he fell in the dust with a groan, and his spirit flew away. Planting my foot on him, I drew the bronze spear out of the wound and laid it down on the ground. This is very, very similar to the way combats between warriors are described in the Iliad. The stag is described here in what, for Homer, are very, very human terms. So yes, this is perhaps an indication that the stag is more than it appears to be, and should be a sign of danger on the island. So how does Odysseus get through this? How does he best the witch?
Hermes.
Yeah, he needs the help of a god to do it. Right, Hermes gives him a magic herb and useful advice, instructions, right? Step-by-step rundown of how one defeats Circe's magic. Right, page 445. So saying, Hermes gave me the herb, pulling it out of the ground and showed it to me. It was black at the root with a milk-white flower. Moly, the gods call it, hard for mortal men to dig up, but the gods can do anything. Hermes rose to the wooded island and up to Olympus, and I went on to Circe's house, brooding darkly on many things. I stood at the gates of the beautiful goddess's house and gave a shout. She heard me call and came out at once. Opening the bright doors and inviting me in, I followed her inside, my heart pounding. She seated me on a beautiful chair of finely wrought silver and prepared me a drink in a golden cup. And with evil in her heart, she laced it with drugs. She gave me the cup, and I drank it off, but it did not bewitch me. So she struck me with her wand and said, "Off to the sty with the rest of your friends." At this, I drew the sharp sword that hung by my thigh and lunged at Circe as if I meant to kill her. The goddess shrieked, and running beneath my blade, grabbed my knees and said to me, wailing. So what's as important here as the actual event, right? Circe tries to drug Odysseus and fails, are the objects described in the conflict, right? What's the object here associated with Circe? What does she give to Odysseus?
Poison or drug.
Golden cup. Yes, good, Louisa. She gives him a golden cup. And what does Odysseus use to put Circe into his power?
A bronze sword.
Yes. His sharp sword. The cup is what's called a Ionic symbol. Right? A Ionic symbol is basically anything that symbolizes feminine power. Right? So named because of its resemblance to a womb or a vagina. Right? Ionic comes from a Sanskrit word for the female genitalia. So its opposite, the sword, is a conventional phallic symbol, right? A kind of substitute penis. So Odysseus is given the symbol of feminine power. It fails to master him, and so he takes his sword, and Circe becomes submissive, right? So we see here expressed a particular Greek cultural value, right? That women's magic, women's powers are less than those of men. Right? Masculine power triumphs over feminine power. Once Odysseus has put his sword to Circe's neck, then how does she start behaving? Yeah, she makes that the suppliant's gesture, right? Grabs his knees, puts herself in his power, and then he spends a year in her bed, right? So, what Odysseus has found, what he finds on most of these islands, right, are kind of alternatives to the Greek way of life, some of which are more civilized than others. And what he tries to do in many of these places is kind of make them more Greek. That's certainly what he does on Circe's Island. Right? He takes Circe's all-female household and masters it himself to make her subservient to him. So that's what's important in the Circe episode. We've only got about 5 minutes, but I do want to talk a little bit about one other island that Odysseus visits. Right, before he gets to Circe, he visits Aeolus, the keeper of the winds. What do you notice about Aeolus's island? What's weird about Aeolus's island?
It's surrounded by a bronze wall.
Okay, surrounded by bronze wall. Right, that itself should be an indicator of civilization, right? What else do we notice about Aeolus Island?
Full of kids.
He's full of kids. He's got a lot of kids.
They're married to each other.
And they're all married to each other, yes. Yes. Aeolus's family is incestuous.
Am I the only one who's reminded of Game of Thrones every time I hear this?
Probably not. Well, and I'm sure that George R.R. Martin is familiar with this stuff. But it's incestuous. And what else do we notice about this island? Do Aeolus and his family and his people actually do any work? Right. They all sit there with their father and mother, continually feasting on abundant good cheer spread out before them. Every day the house is filled with steamy savor, and the courtyard resounds. Every night the men sleep next to their highborn wives on blankets strewn in their corded beds. Right? They don't work. Right? All they do is eat and have sex and party, right? So, does this look like human life? Who else's existence is like this?
The gods.
Yeah, exactly. These people are more like the gods.
Including the incestuous part.
Yeah, absolutely. Most of the Olympian gods are married to a sibling.
Like, which is crazy.
Well, I mean, there weren't a lot of other families of gods running around. You know, probably didn't have a lot of options. But yeah, Aeolus and his people live like gods. This could also be critical of certain other civilizations that neighbored the Greeks. Incest for the Greeks was generally a taboo, right? You were not supposed to marry close relatives. But for other neighboring peoples, like for example the Egyptians, that was how you kept royal bloodlines pure, right? You married a first cousin or a brother or a sister so that you didn't get any peasant blood mixing in there.
I thought first cousins weren't really that taboo in most of these cultures.
Depends on your rank. The first cousin is usually not that big a deal. But yeah, the Egyptians would marry brothers to sisters.
Which is, that's...
But hey, that was the aristocratic practice of the time, right? It's you wanted to keep rule within a single family. You wanted to preserve that family's quote-unquote purity. Of course, what you then ended up doing was making them extremely vulnerable to weird genetic diseases.
And tails.
Well, you know, sure. But the Aeolus episode is important for one other reason. We're going to close it. We're just sort of going to close this there then. When Odysseus shows up on the island, what does Aeolus do for him?
He gives him a bag of wind.
Yep, feasts him and gives him a present, right? Does exactly what he's supposed to do. I give you my hospitality. Now I give you a bag of winds, right? These are all the adverse winds that would keep you from getting home. Off with you now. Does he treat Odysseus the same way when he comes back? He does not. No, so you are clearly cursed by the gods, right? Get the hell off my island. Do you think, by the standards the cultural standards we've seen elsewhere in the text, Aeolus is in the right or in the wrong? Why'd you say in the right, Will?
Because if he helps him again, then he's clearly defying the gods, and he's in favor with the gods, and he doesn't want to lose favor with the gods.
Yeah, he's under no obligation to help Odysseus again. Right? He already did really more than he needed to for him. Right? He followed the rules of hospitality, and then this guy shows up again and has the gall to ask for more. Right? There's being hospitable, and there's enabling a mooch. And the Greeks did not consider themselves to be under any obligation to enable a mooch, right? You didn't have to keep giving hospitality to someone who kept coming back for it. Okay, so I think this should give us enough of a cultural standard to provide a kind of yardstick for the other Greek texts that we're going to be looking at next week and the week after. So I think what have I got you reading for Tuesday? Is it the Sappho poems or the Euripides play? Euripides is okay for Tuesday. Okay, yeah. So I don't have the guide questions with me because I brought the wrong flash drive today because I'm poorly organized. But I will email those to you this afternoon. All right. Have a good weekend, everybody.